Welcome back to Fast Market. I'm Alex Coffey alongside Kevin Hanks. Kev, we can't not talk about the markets here with things on the move. And we pointed out the Russell comeback. And hey, at least right now, it's starting to pull the rest of these markets up. So we're looking at things. It's still a pretty broad sell-off at the current moment here, Kev, with the S&P's down 1%, NASDAQ 1.1%, but the Dow actually out in front now, only down 0.9%, Kev. We are off the lows. I think that's safe to say.
And VIX now back below 19. Remember, it got up to, I think, about 20.5 is what I saw when I was glancing at the screen a little earlier. So, yeah, volatility already starting to come out of this market, Alex, and the Dow hanging in there. This market is turning into from a sell-off to more of a choppy identity, Alex.
Yeah, volatility at 1881 when you're looking at the VIX here. So great point, Kev, as you're seeing some of that intraday kind of feeling around the risk subside here just a little bit. But let's move on. We're going to come back to the market throughout the show. Things are starting to stabilize here a little bit. Let's go to our cash tag segment. For that, I'd like to welcome in TD Ameritrade Network contributor Jenny Horn. And also joining us is the co-founder of LikeFolio.com, Landon Swan. Long time no see, Mr. Swan. Glad to see you're still alive and kicking. Was a little bit worried there for a little bit. But all is well. Jenny, we're talking some denim here. So Levi's earnings, that's really the crux of why we're talking about these. But we love to compare two different companies. And we're going to take this opportunity to compare it with American Eagle as well.
Yes, this space actually generates a ton of noise on social media. I was shocked to see as many people as there were tweeting about both American Eagle jeans and Levi. But Levi, like you mentioned, has second quarter earnings today after market close. And many people are eager to see if sort of stores have recovered or sales have recovered since stores have reopened, of course, in the more like reopened economy that we see right now. So many people are actually saying that Levi is undervalued despite the fact that it's run up about 40% in 2021 and it's risen about 130% from its pandemic lows. So right now, what I think is interesting about this space is actually over the last year, denim was not the coolest trend for both American Eagle and Levi. Levi, which is of course famous for its denim, has really begun diversifying beyond jeans. Their CEO said they expect half of Levi's revenue to come from products that are not denim bottoms specifically over the next decade, which would be up from 11% in 2015 and 21% in 2020. So they are moving actually outside of jeans, it sounds like. Plus, American Eagle's brand Aerie, which is mostly loungewear, has sort of been its savior over the last year. It accounts for now about 40% of the company's sales. So I do think that's interesting when you look at the last year. But now, according to social media, denim is the hottest thing. I think this is due to a lot of different reasons. Some are saying that they put on some extra pounds during the pandemic, so now they need new jeans. Others are saying that sort of trends have evolved over the last year, and now the jeans they had, say, year and a half ago, are no longer in trend. So that brings me to our first tweet of the day, which sort of talks about Levi's heightened expectations ahead of this report, which is actually in response to Oliver Rennick today, which says, in my opinion, Levi is a higher price tag fashion trend, and denim is also currently a hot trend for home fashion. They have an awesome collection at Target. So I thought this was interesting, that denim being a hot trend for home fashion, because I can honestly say I did not put on a pair of jeans one single time during the pandemic when I was at home. But hey, I don't discount that jeans are coming back, regardless. But I have to say that shocking to me, American Eagle jeans have almost a cult-like following on social media. So much noise, so many people saying they love it. I also had to ask some of my friends who were on TikTok, and apparently American Eagle jeans are very cool right now on TikTok as well. So that brings me to our next tweet of the day, which says, okay, literally everyone keeps talking about how awesome American Eagle jeans are, so I guess I have to go try some on tomorrow and see if I fall in love. So, Landon, when we're comparing both of these names, obviously American Eagle doesn't have earnings tomorrow, I think in August. But when we compare both of these names, just as far as consumer trends in this jeans space, what are you seeing with Levi versus American Eagle?
Well, Jenny, I think you're right about the trends evolving. So what we're seeing is that a lot of the skinny jeans are moving out of style, maybe by necessity, but they're moving to a looser fit, more boot cuts, flared, and Levi has all of that. So they have all that in stock. So they benefited a lot from this move. Very nice for them, obviously. But, I think what we're seeing a lot of is, a big boost in March where people are upgrading their closet as the pandemic is starting to end and that people are going out more and everything you have is, a year and a half, 2 years old. And then also, of course, a huge influx of back to school shopping, which is predictable, but it is starting now. It's starting to ramp up. We're getting numbers around plus 56% quarter over quarter for back to school starting shopping. So obviously that's ramping up. Now what we're seeing here is it's interesting. If you look at how Levi's doing year over year, pretty strong numbers, plus 19%. Quarter over quarter, when you zoom in a little bit, as far as the quarter end date, then it's pretty flat. It's like plus 2 or 3%. But if you go in even further and look at how they're doing now versus 90 days ago, it's actually negative. And so the story with Levi is I think they're going to be able to put out a decent report, probably maybe even surprising a little bit to the upside. But the more you zoom in or the closer you get on that moving average and include the most recent data, the worse they get. So I think that moving forward, I'm a little bit concerned, especially when you compare it to American Eagle. They have been doing much better. Not when you look at the year over year, but the closer you zoom in again. So it's the opposite story. So they've got a lot of traction moving forward over the last recent little bit, especially with their Aerie brand. As you mentioned, they have done extremely well with that brand. Happiness is through the roof. I think that overall Levi's happiness is 68%, American Eagle 79%, and Aerie, just that brand alone, is at 86%. So they do have a cult-like following. They're doing extremely well. And as you can see on this chart, when you look at how things are going at this moment, quarter over quarter, Levi is struggling about negative 5%, American Eagle plus 5%. So what's going to be interesting is how does the market react to this report? They may do well on the quarter that's being reported. I'm not sure about guidance, but if there's any sell-off at all that affects American Eagle, which they don't report for 5 or 6 weeks, it could be an interesting play to buy into that dip if Levi pulls American Eagle down because they are such close competitors.
Yeah, Landon, July 8th, obviously on Levi, August 25th on American Eagle. When I think of Levi's, right, I think of iconic brands, right? And I think of Converse Chuck Taylors. I think of Ralph Lauren Polo. I think of Campbell's soup, chicken noodle and tomato soup. I think of the Mustang. I think of these. This is an iconic brand that people of my age and drifting lower will always lean on and go to for the quality and the, obviously their jeans come and go and brands are all over the place and they stay consistent with their brands. And so remember, this is a company that went private for a while and then just came back on the market within the last year or so. So I think that this is a brand that had a nice beat on earnings last quarter. We're going back to school is probably going to be an interesting time for them. So boy, it's hard for me to take an iconic brand like this, and it may not be the sexiest brand in the world, but it's certainly a mainstay and a long-term player, guys.
Landon, along those lines, when I'm looking at the full company consumer purchase intent mentions for Levi, this is really the question. It's pretty much what Kevin's getting at, so I'm glad he said it. I look at this company and I don't see tons of growth, but I don't see tons of necessarily declines in growth. This in a way, even though it's a discretionary product, if you kind of like put things into buckets, aren't jeans kind of just a staple in fashion? And I think that's what Kevin's getting at here. And you kind of got to set expectations accordingly in terms of, you're going to have 1 or 2 pairs of jeans in your arsenal. The average person, maybe someone who's really into fashion, has 5 or 6. But for the most part, jeans have, stood the test of time. And so when I'm looking at this and I see a 19% year over year growth, is that, even though it seems small on here, fairly extraordinary?
Well, you got to remember what you're comparing to, right? I mean, you're talking about 2020, which everything was down. If you go back even further, then it's not nearly as impressive, versus 2019. It's pretty close to flat. That said, I will say that digital is something that they've absolutely dominated. So you compare that to 2019, they're up 80%. compare that to 2019, they're up 80%, even having growth up 17% from last year when everything was digital. So they've done a very good job executing on that front. And I think a lot of the questions, to your point, jeans are a staple. I think a lot of the questions that are going to come from analysts are going to be around their move away from jeans, as Jenny talked about. If they're 20% now, but they want to get to half to 50% of non-jean products, they're going to be copying that sort of American Eagle Aerie brand, and that's the one that's driving success in that company. So if they can show that they're going to be able to execute, then forward-looking is very strong. But if not, I think it's just, jeans are jeans. They're making some sales back to school. People are updating their closets. All that's sort of expected. And with the stock at, I think, maybe 10% off all-time highs, and they had a great report last quarter, expectations may be a little bit too high to support any kind of just expected growth. They may need to come with something and really lay out that plan of how they're going to accelerate into non-jeans, because again, as you mentioned, that's a very predictable sales cycle. And from what we see, it's maybe a little bit better than expected, but it's not, popping off the charts or anything like that. So very interested to see how analysts react, and if at all, AEO is affected by Levi's earnings. So I want to see if there's a pull down or a move alongside of those. And if anything's negative on AEO, I'm a buyer because I think that they're outperforming and they're looking very strong moving into the future.
So Landon, I like that you mentioned digital sales, because that was also something I was looking at, because obviously their presence in that area has grown significantly over the last year. But I saw actually in their last quarter, their direct-to-consumer digital offering jumped 10%. And you have to think, Levi's are available at so many other places outside of just a traditional Levi's store. Target now has this great partnership. So is that leading to higher consumer happiness? Because I have to think that, American Eagle, I just associate typically with a mall, which I can't imagine people are necessarily super happy going into malls. I mean, maybe I'm a little biased, but Levi's, you can get at so many different types of venues.
Yeah, you're right. Absolutely. I think, it's interesting. If you think about years ago, no one was buying clothes online because you had to make sure they fit. But now you got your size, you know what you like. And if you stick with your brand, everyone can go online. So digital sales is doing extremely well. And I would say you're right as far as the mall shopping. We are definitely seeing an uptick in that. But, compared to 2020, that was rock bottom. So that's kind of a given. And yeah, AEO is more mall driven, and I think Levi is in more places. But the fact that they have adapted to the change in style, they've adapted to the digital, and now they're putting out this idea that they're going to adapt to a more, diversified product offering is going to be very appealing for investors.
Landon, as I wrap things here and kind of summarize all that's been said, it sounds like in Levi, and please correct me if I'm wrong, that you're not necessarily sour on the company. It's just that there's not enough here to excite you. So you're not necessarily a buyer here, and you're worried that there's not going to be enough in this report to excite investors and really get this moving to the upside. On the counter side for American Eagle, it sounds like anything that could spark some volatility to the downside, you see as an opportunity to buy into this brand, because while it's associated with jeans, this Aerie brand and the insane amount of strength you're seeing both from happiness and growth is enough to really do what Levi is failing to do right now, which is excite investors.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. And again, on Levi, I would say that, we're leaning to the side of saying, I think they're going to have a good report. I think they're going to have good numbers as of the end of the quarter. But if you look what happened after the quarter, things are starting to drift down a little bit. So it really just comes out to what is the guidance going to be? How many questions are going to be around the more recent sales since the end of the quarter? So again, good quarter. I think that's going to be reported very well. But starting to wane a little bit, the purchase intent and happiness is very low. So again, yeah, just like you said, anything that pulls AEO down, I'm a buyer, because I think they're very strong long-term. I don't think Levi is going to do that. I don't think they'll pull down AEO with this report, but there is that potential if there's enough questions about the forward demand.
Good stuff. Co-founder of LikeFolio.com, Landon Swan. Always a pleasure. Jenny, jeans dominating the conversation here, but as mentioned for both these companies, there is more to it. And Levi, maybe it's more of a stretch goal at the current moment, but that, as Landon said, could be a key part going forward. But it is an earnings play, and so that's where we sit now. Stock fairly unchanged here, Jenny, but at $27.98, as Landon said, about 10% off the highs.
Yeah, and it's actually wild. I've been watching